Her hands were red from the wind before she even touched the gate. Wren Galloway stood at the mouth of an abandoned mine cut into a ridge in eastern Tennessee, on a morning in early November, holding a folded piece of paper between fingers that had gone stiff with cold. The paper was a county tax auction receipt, printed on thermal stock that was already starting to yellow at the edges. It read, Lot 77, 1-4, Kessler Ridge Mine entrance, and 4.1 acres, sold, $5. $5. The price of a drive-through lunch. The clerk who stamped it had not looked up from her keyboard. Behind her, everything she owned was in a duffel bag strapped to the back of a bicycle she had rebuilt from 2 broken ones. The frame was from a mountain bike she pulled out of a ditch. The wheels were from a road bike someone left behind at Goodwill. The chain was new, or close to it, the only part she had actually paid for. She was 18 years old. She had been homeless for 11 days, since the foster system released her on her birthday, with a garbage bag of clothes and a printed list of shelters in the Tri-County area. She was not going to a shelter. She was going into the dark. The mine entrance was a timber-framed rectangle cut into red clay and limestone, roughly 6 feet high and 5 feet wide. A rusted cattle gate had been wired shut across it years ago, with baling wire that had gone orange with age. A faded sign hung from one remaining bolt. Danger, no trespassing. The morning fog was still pooling at the base of the ridge, collecting in the low spots between the oaks like something poured there on purpose, and the mine exhaled a slow, mineral-cold breath that moved the fog outward in a thin curl. The air tasted like cold pennies. She set down the duffel bag, unzipped the front pouch, and pulled out a pair of wire cutters. Before she touched the first strand of baling wire, she reached into the chest pocket of her jacket and pressed her fingers against something there. A folded map, hand-drawn in blue ink, creased so many times the paper had gone soft as cloth. She held her hand against it for 1 second. She did not unfold it. Not yet. Then she began cutting. By the end of that week, Wren Galloway would be standing 700 feet inside that mountain, in a room that was never supposed to be found, holding documents that proved her foster mother had died knowing a secret that powerful men in Hardin County needed to stay buried. Literally buried, behind 1,000 tons of Tennessee limestone. And she would understand, finally, why a woman who had always told her to be brave had also told her, in the last letter she ever wrote, to be afraid. But standing at the gate that morning, she did not know any of that yet. She knew only 3 things. That she owned 4 acres of worthless rock. That the woman who had saved her life had drawn this map for a reason. And that $5 was every cent she had left in the world. To understand why an 18-year-old girl with nothing would spend everything on a hole in a mountain, you have to go back 2 years, to a kitchen in a house on Barker Road. And to the last morning, Lorraine Kessler was strong enough to sit up. Lorraine Kessler's kitchen was the first room Wren had ever entered that smelled like someone had been cooking for hours, and did not mind if you sat down. There was flour on the counter, from biscuits made at 5 in the morning. There was a cast-iron skillet on the stove that had not been fully cleaned since the 1980s, and that was by design. The windows were single-pane, and let in drafts that Lorraine fought with rolled-up towels pressed against the sills. And the table was a 4-person oak table, with one leg shimmed by a folded piece of cardboard that had been there so long it had compressed into something nearly as hard as wood. Wren arrived in that house at 14, her 9th placement, carrying a garbage bag and a conviction that no adult could be trusted for longer than a season. Lorraine was 59, 5'2", and had hands like a mechanic, scarred across the knuckles and always certain of where they were going. She had fostered 11 children over 22 years. She never promised Wren it would be easy. She promised it would be honest. Lorraine's husband, Earl Kessler, had died of heart failure in November of 2013. Earl had been a quiet man who worked with his hands and owned a small parcel of land up on Kessler Ridge, 4 acres with an old copper and zinc prospect mine on it that had never produced enough ore to justify commercial operation. The mine had been surveyed in 1987 and deemed sub-commercial. After Earl died, the property taxes went unpaid. Lorraine was too consumed with grief and with raising Wren to deal with a piece of land she had never cared about. The county eventually seized the parcel for back taxes and put it on the auction list, where it sat for years, because no one wanted a hole in a hill. Wren learned to read the physical world the way some children learn to read faces, because her survival depended on it. In foster placements that changed every few months, she learned to scan a room the moment she walked in, which doors locked from the outside, which floorboards creaked, which cabinets had food in them, and which were for show. By 15, she was working weekend salvage jobs with a crew that stripped condemned buildings before demolition. She could tell by the wear marks on a doorframe whether a room had been used recently. She could read rust the way a doctor reads an X-ray, distinguishing surface oxidation from structural decay by the color and the texture under her thumb. She knew which bolts would give and which ones would snap. Lorraine noticed this about her. One evening, watching Wren take apart a broken toaster on the kitchen table and sort the components by material without being asked, Lorraine said, "You see what people leave behind. That is a gift and a wound, and you will have to decide which one it is." 2 years before the mine, in October, Lorraine was dying. A progressive lung condition that had been tightening its grip for years finally took hold in a way that would not let go. On her last strong morning, she sat Wren down at the kitchen table and put 2 things in front of her. The first was a hand-drawn map of the mine on Kessler Ridge, sketched in blue ink on a sheet of legal pad paper that had been folded and refolded until the creases were valleys. The second was a stack of 7 handwritten pages in the same blue ink, covered in Lorraine's careful, slightly slanted script. Lorraine's hands were shaking as she laid them on the table, and Wren noticed that the shaking was not from the illness. It was from something else. The first page of the letters began, "I found something in Earl's mine that was not supposed to be there. I am too sick to do anything about it now, and I am too afraid to tell anyone in this county. If I die before I can act, this map and these pages are yours. You are the only person I trust to be both brave enough and careful enough. Do not go to the county. Do not trust Dale Fentress. Go to the mine yourself and bring a camera." Wren read the name, Dale Fentress, and did not recognize it. Lorraine explained, speaking slowly because her breath came in short rations now. Fentress was the administrator who oversaw child services placements in Hardin County. He had a second county role too, sitting on the committee that recommended which tax lien properties should be auctioned off. He had been the one to push Earl's parcel onto the auction list after Earl died. Lorraine did not explain why that mattered. She said, "Read the rest of the letters when you are ready, not before." Lorraine died 11 days later. She was 61 years old. The morning after the funeral, Wren found the map and the 7 pages in a Ziploc bag taped inside the lining of Lorraine's winter coat, hidden in the back of a closet that smelled like menthol lozenges and lavender soap. The coat still smelled like Lorraine's kitchen. Wren pressed the coat against her face and held it there until she could breathe again. And then she took the Ziploc bag and put it inside a waterproof pouch she carried with her, everywhere. Wren spent the next 22 months doing nothing with the map. She was 16 when Lorraine died, still technically in the foster system, and she was moved to a new placement in a different part of the county. The new home was adequate, which was the best word for it. She kept the letters and the map in the waterproof pouch tucked into the inner pocket of her jacket, and she read them at night when the house was quiet. She memorized entire passages. She could close her eyes and see the blue ink curving into Lorraine's particular way of making a capital D, which always leaned a little to the left, as if it were listening. But she did not act, and the reason was not fear, or not only fear. It was something more complicated and more human than that. Acting meant Lorraine's fear had been justified. It meant the woman who had taught her that the world could be honest had also known the world was corrupt, and had been too afraid to fight it. Wren did not want Lorraine to have been afraid. She wanted Lorraine to have been wrong. So she held the letters and did not go to the mine, and she told herself that the right time would come, and the months piled up like dead leaves. On her 18th birthday, the foster system released Wren Galloway into the world. The process was exactly as impersonal as it sounds. She was given a garbage bag, a list of shelters, and her emancipation paperwork. Among the documents was a summary of her foster care benefits, the federal payments that had been made on her behalf to Hardin County Child Services for the 4 years of her placement. The total was $47,616. Wren had never seen a penny of direct benefit from it. That, by itself, was not unusual. The money went to the county to offset care costs, and in most cases, it was spent legitimately. But she remembered Lorraine's letter and the name Dale Fentress, and she remembered something else Lorraine had said, not in the letters, but aloud on a night when Wren had asked why the system worked the way it did. Lorraine had been sitting in the recliner by the window, an oxygen cannula across her face, and she had looked at Wren with an expression that was not anger, but something older and sadder than anger. The mummy follows the child, Wren. That is how it is supposed to work. Someone in this county made sure it followed them instead. Standing in the parking lot of the social services office on her birthday, holding a garbage bag and $7.23 in cash, Wren made the decision she had been putting off for 22 months. She was going to find Earl's mine, get inside, and see what Lorraine had found. And she was going to bring a camera. The plan came together in pieces, the way plans do when you have no money and no one to call. First, she needed to acquire the property legally. She discovered, using a public computer at a library branch, that Lot 7714, the Kessler Ridge parcel, was still on the county tax auction list. It had been listed for 3 consecutive years with no bidders. The minimum bid was $5. She had $7.23. She attended the auction on November the 3rd. The room was a fluorescent-lit conference room in the county courthouse, and she was the only person in it under 60. The auctioneer, a man with reading glasses on a chain, called Lot 7714 at 10:47 in the morning. No one else raised a hand. Sold. $5. Wren signed the paperwork with a pen she borrowed from the clerk. She now legally owned the mine entrance and 4.1 acres of East Tennessee Ridge. Second, the cover story. Wren told anyone who asked, and in a town of 2,200 people, several asked, that she was planning to clear scrap metal and debris from the mine entrance. Salvage work. The kind of thing a broke teenager might do to scrape together a few dollars. No one questioned it, because no one believed the mine had any value. The copper and zinc deposits had been surveyed in 1987 and deemed not worth extracting. The mine was a hole in a hill. That was exactly what Wren needed them to believe. Third, the surveillance. With her remaining $2.23 and $40 she earned doing 2 days of roadside cleanup work for a landscaping crew, she bought 3 battery-powered trail cameras from a pawn shop in Denton for $14 each. The kind hunters strapped to trees to track deer. One of the 3 had a cracked plastic housing that she sealed with a strip of electrical tape. Total cost for the cameras, $42. She set them to motion activation with timestamp overlay and planned their placement carefully. 2 at the mine entrance, 1 aimed outward at the access road and 1 aimed inward at the gate, and a 3rd on a pine tree, 50 yards down the fire road that served as the only vehicle access to the property. Fourth, the exploration itself. Lorraine's hand-drawn map showed the main tunnel running roughly 700 feet northwest into the ridge, with 2 side chambers marked. One was labeled E's Tools. The other was circled 3 times in blue ink, with a single word beside it in Lorraine's handwriting. Careful. Wren planned to work inward systematically, clearing debris, checking the structural soundness of the timbers, documenting everything with her phone camera, a cracked screen prepaid model with 11 gigabytes of storage remaining. In the letters, Lorraine had written, "The second chamber is behind a wall that looks natural, but is not. Earl built it. He was a better mason than anyone knew. You will have to feel for the scene. It is at shoulder height on the left side, about 40 paces past the first branch. Trust your hands, not your eyes." On the morning of November the 5th, 2 days after the auction, Wren loaded her duffel bag, strapped it to the bicycle, and pedaled 7 miles uphill to Kessler Ridge. She did not know it yet, but by nightfall, she would not be alone in that mine. The caffle gate came away easier than she expected. The wire cutters made quick work of the baling wire, and the gate swung inward with a sound like a long, slow exhale of metal against rock. The mine entrance was timbered with oak posts that had gone black with age, but still looked solid. Wren tapped each one with the handle of a wrench she carried in her back pocket. Solid, solid, solid. The fourth one gave back a slightly hollow note. Not dangerous yet, but weakened. And she marked it in her mind the way she marked every imperfection, automatically, the way the salvage crews had taught her. Inside, the air changed within 10 paces. It went from the cold penny smell of the entrance to something older, deeper, wetter, limestone sweat and iron-heavy clay, and something else underneath, faintly organic, like damp paper that had been sitting in the dark for years. She turned on her phone flashlight. The tunnel ran straight for about 80 feet, then curved left. The floor was packed earth with old rail ties half buried in it, the remnants of an ore cart track from the original prospecting days. There was debris everywhere. Fallen timbers, crushed beer cans from trespassers who had gotten this far and no further, a child's sneaker so old it was stiff as cardboard. Wren photographed each item. Habit from salvage work. You document the site before you touch anything. At the curve, she heard breathing, not hers. She stopped and held her own breath. The sound was low, rhythmic, and it came from a shape pressed against the tunnel wall, half buried in a pile of dead leaves it had dragged inside. A dog. Large, brindle-coated, a hound mix with long ears and a broad chest, sleeping on the leaves like it had been doing this for weeks. The dog opened one eye, assessed her with the calm of an animal that had survived long enough to know when something was not a threat, and closed it again. No growl. No fear. Wren sat down 3 feet from the dog and waited. After 4 minutes, the dog stood, shook itself, walked over and pressed its head against her knee. She could feel every rib through the coat. The dog's eyes were gold-brown and steady, and its tail moved once, a single slow wag that was more acknowledgement than enthusiasm. She named it Lantern, because it was the first warm thing she found in the dark. She spent the next 2 hours installing the trail cameras. Entrance camera 1, aimed outward down the fire road, zip-tied to a timber post at head height, the lens smeared with a thin coat of clay to hide the glint. Entrance camera 2, aimed inward, capturing anyone who stepped past the gate. Road camera, strapped to a pine 47 yards down the slope, angled to catch headlights and license plates. Motion activated, timestamp overlay, battery life, roughly 12 days per camera. She tested each one by walking through the frame, then checked the playback on the camera's tiny screen. Clear enough. A face would be identifiable. A license plate would be readable. She had spent $42 on a security system, and it worked. Days 2 through 4, November 6 through 8. Wren worked inward methodically, clearing debris, testing timbers, photographing everything. Lantern followed her in and out, seemingly comfortable underground, sleeping in the entrance when Wren went deep and padding after her when she came back to the light. The main tunnel extended roughly 680 feet, close to Lorraine's estimate of 700. The first side chamber, the one marked E's Tools on the map, held exactly what the label promised. Earl Kessler's old hand tools, a kerosene lantern, coils of wire, a folding chair. Everything was coated in a fine layer of calcite dust that turned the metal a chalky white. She photographed it, noted the tools she might need, and moved on. On day 4, November the 8th, mid-afternoon, she reached the area Lorraine's map had circled 3 times, 42 paces past the first branch. Lorraine had written 40, close enough. Wren ran her hands along the left wall at shoulder height. The stone felt continuous, cold, slightly damp, the texture of natural limestone that had been exposed for decades. She almost walked past it. Then her fingertips caught something. A line. Not a crack, because cracks are jagged, irregular, formed by pressure and time. This was straight, plumb straight, running vertically for about 4 feet, then turning 90 degrees and running horizontally. A joint. The mortar had been color-matched to the surrounding limestone, so carefully that in the beam of a phone flashlight it was invisible. But to fingertips trained on salvage work, trained to feel the difference between natural fracture and human intention, it was unmistakable. Lorraine had written, Earl could lay stone like his grandfather taught him. He could make a wall that looked like God put it there. He built that wall to hide something, and he hid it well enough that no one found it for years. But I found it because I knew his hands. Wren found it because Lorraine told her where to look, and because she trusted her hands. She retrieved Earl's own chisel from the tool chamber and worked at the mortar for 40 minutes. The wall section came away in 3 pieces, each about 18 inches across, and behind it was a space roughly 6 feet deep, 4 feet wide, and 5 feet high. A natural alcove in the limestone that Earl had sealed off with masonry, that could have fooled a geologist at a distance. Inside the alcove stood a steel filing cabinet, 2 drawers, padlocked with a commercial-grade master lock, key-operated. The cabinet was bolted to the rock floor with lag bolts and expansion anchors. Someone had intended this to stay exactly where it was, for as long as the mountain stood. Wren did not have the key. She used a pry bar from Earl's tools, and 40 minutes of leverage that left her forearms burning. The lock broke at 3:22 in the afternoon, with a crack that echoed down the tunnel and sent Lantern's ears flat. The top drawer held manila file folders, each labeled by hand with a year: 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. The bottom drawer held a dark green metal lockbox, smaller, also locked, and a large sealed envelope with one word written on it in blue ink. In handwriting, Wren recognized instantly. Lorraine's. She did not open the envelope. Not yet. She photographed everything in place, the way the salvage crews had taught her to document a site before you touched anything. Then she sat on the mine floor with her back against the cold limestone, and Lantern pressed against her side, and she opened the first folder. 2008. What she read inside it would take her 3 more days to fully understand. And by then, the trail cameras would have caught someone else coming. That night, November the 8th, at 11:30, Wren woke to Lantern's growl. Not a bark. A growl, sustained and directional, aimed at the darkness beyond the gate. She lay still inside the tent she had pitched just inside the mine entrance, warmer than outside, out of the wind, and she listened. An engine. Distant at first, growing closer, then stopping. No headlights. Whoever it was had killed them before turning onto the fire road. Then a flashlight beam swept the mine entrance from outside, pausing on the cut cattle gate, then going dark. Footsteps on gravel. A pause that lasted long enough for Wren to count her own heartbeats. 12 of them. Then the engine started again, and the vehicle backed away down the fire road, and was gone. She did not move for 10 minutes. Then she checked the road camera's motion log. It had triggered at 11:27 p.m. She could not review the footage in the dark. The camera's screen was too small and too dim. She would have to wait for morning, but she already knew one thing. The cut gate was visible. Someone had come to check on the mine at 11:30 at night with their headlights off. Lorraine had written, in the 5th page of her letters, "If someone comes to check on the mine after you open it, that is your answer. That means what I found is still worth hiding." At dawn, Wren pulled the road camera's memory card and slid it into her phone's micro SD adapter. The timestamp read 11:27 p.m. The vehicle was a white Chevrolet Tahoe with Hardin County plates, and the man standing in the frame, flashlight in hand, staring at the cut gate, she did not know his face yet, but she would. The road camera's footage was grainy but usable. The timestamp overlay read 11:27 and 14 seconds p.m., November 8th. The white Chevrolet Tahoe had county plates, number HCD 440. 1. The man was heavyset, somewhere around 60 years old, wearing a dark jacket and a ball cap pulled low over his forehead. He had walked from the Tahoe to within 15 feet of the mine entrance, swept his flashlight across the cut gate for 9 seconds, then stood completely still for another 12. He did not call out. He did not try the gate. He just stood and looked, as if he were calculating something. Then he turned around, walked back to the vehicle, and left. Wren photographed the camera's screen with her phone and saved the images in 3 separate folders. Then she did something that would have seemed reckless to anyone who did not understand what she was doing. She rewired the cattle gate shut. Not sealed, just loosely wired the way it had been before she cut it. Just enough to look undisturbed from a distance. She wanted him to come back. She wanted to know if this was curiosity or a pattern. And she wanted better footage. She moved entrance camera 2 to a different angle. Lower, aimed upward, so it would catch a face rather than a silhouette. She tested the angle with her own face, confirmed it was clear, and recamouflaged the camera with a scrap of bark. Then she went back inside the mine and continued reading. The 2008 and 2009 folders contained spreadsheets, hand-tabulated columns of numbers printed on county letterhead. Each row was a child's case number. No names, just numbers. Each number was followed by monthly dollar amounts. Some rows had check marks beside them. Others had a second column of smaller amounts, and those were circled in red. Wren did not understand the accounting yet, but she understood the structure. 2 sets of numbers for the same children, and someone had been tracking the difference between them. In the 2009 folder, a yellow sticky note in handwriting she did not recognize read, "MR's share, 40%. Hold until property closes." The initials MR meant nothing to her. Not yet. Lorraine's 6th letter fragment, written in the same blue ink, placed between pages of the 2012 folder like a bookmark, read, "The numbers in those folders are children, Wren." Every row is a child the county was paid to protect. Someone turned those children into line items, and then they turned the line items into cash. I know because one of those case numbers is yours. Wren found her case number in the 2012 folder. Row 117. The check-marked column showed $993 per month, her federal foster care maintenance payment. The circled column showed $397. She stared at the difference. $596 a month for 21 months, which was the length of her placement before Lorraine. $12,516. Taken from a child who had been eating canned soup in a placement where the heater did not work. She did not cry. She folded the page back into the folder and moved to the next year, night 6. November the 10th, 2:17 in the morning. Lantern growled again. This time Wren was ready. She lay in the dark and listened. Engine, no headlights, same pattern. The footsteps came closer this time. She heard the gate wire being tested. A tug, then another tug, harder. Then a full minute of silence so complete she could hear the man breathing on the other side of the gate. Then the footsteps retreated, and the engine faded down the fire road. At dawn, entrance camera 2 had captured exactly what she needed. A clear front-lit face. The ball cap was the same. The jaw was heavy. The eyes were looking directly at the gate, close enough that the camera caught the texture of the stubble on his chin. She did not have a name for the face, but she had a county plate number, HCD 4401. And she had Lorraine's warning, "Do not trust Dale Fentress." Wren spent 2 full days working on the lockbox. It was a fireproof steel document box, combination locked, the kind you buy at an office supply store to keep important papers safe from flood or fire. She tried Lorraine's birthday. Nothing. Earl's birthday. Nothing. Their wedding anniversary, which Lorraine had mentioned once while making dinner, June 14th, 1979. Nothing. On the second day, she found a strip of masking tape stuck to the inside lid of the filing cabinet's top drawer. 4 numbers in Earl's handwriting. 4/1973. April 19th, 1973. The date the mine was originally registered with the state of Tennessee. The lockbox opened on the first try. Inside 4 things. A ledger notebook, black hardcover, college-ruled, 78 pages filled in 2 different handwritings. The first handwriting was Earl's, small and blocky. The second, which took over on page 43, was Lorraine's, and Wren recognized it the way you recognize a voice in the dark. The ledger cross-referenced the county's foster care case numbers with names. Full names, children's names, foster families' names, and the monthly payment amounts year by year from 2006 to 2014. 94 children listed. 94 rows. The second thing. Photocopied checks. 11 of them, each made out to a company called Ridgepoint Land Holdings, LLC, signed by someone named Dale R. Fentress, drawn on a Hardin County government account. The amounts ranged from $3,200 to $11,450. Each check's memo line read, Property Services. The third thing, a single sheet of Hardin County letterhead, undated, with a handwritten note in the same unknown handwriting from the sticky note in the 2009 folder. It read, Dale need lot 7714 cleared from auction list until we clean out E's stuff. M.R. The initials and the handwriting together now. M.R. was someone who knew about the mine, knew about Earl's hidden evidence, and had asked Fentress to keep the property off the market. The fact that the parcel had been sitting on the auction list for 3 years, with no buyers, suggested the plan had eventually changed. The safest play, someone had decided, was to let the property go to auction and hope no one ever went inside. The fourth thing. Lorraine's sealed envelope. Wren opened it last. Inside was a single handwritten page, blue ink, undated, addressed to no one and to anyone who found it. If you are reading this, I did not make it. I am sorry. I found these files in Earl's mine 6 months after he died. Earl had been gathering this evidence for 2 years before his heart gave out. He told me once that he stumbled onto it by accident. A county check made out to a company that did not exist for a service that was never performed. Left in a folder he was never supposed to see at a county meeting. He traced it back to the children, to the payments made in their names, to the man who was supposed to protect them. Earl hid the evidence in the mine because he was afraid. He was a quiet man, and he did not know who to trust. I am hiding this letter here because I am afraid too, and because I am sick, and because the man who stole from those children is the same man who decides what happens to foster kids in this county. I do not know how far it reaches. I only know it reaches further than Earl or I can fight alone. If you have found this, you are braver than we were. Please be careful. Please do not let them bury it again. Wren sat in the dark with the letter on her knees and Lantern's head on her boot, and she read it 3 times. Each time, the blue ink seemed to get sharper, as if the words were pressing themselves into the paper harder than Lorraine had originally written them. Then she folded the letter carefully, put it in the waterproof pouch with the others, and placed the pouch back inside her jacket. The night visits continued. Not every night, but every second or third night. Always between 11 at night and 3 in the morning. Always the same white Tahoe. Always the same pattern. Drive up dark. Check the gate. Leave. On night 10, November the 14th, the pattern changed. Wren had added a new element to her surveillance. Among Earl's tools, she had found a voice-activated digital recorder, a small Olympus unit, battery still functional, the kind a person might use for lectures or interviews. She did not know if Earl had used it for evidence gathering. She charged it using a portable battery pack she had traded salvage labor for, and zip-tied it to the timber just inside the mine entrance, behind a loose panel of bark, 3 feet from the gate. On the night of November the 14th, the Tahoe came at 1:08 in the morning. But this time the engine cut off. 2 doors opened, not one. Wren was inside the mine, approximately 200 feet in the dark, behind a pile of debris she had deliberately arranged as a concealment point days earlier. Lantern was beside her. She had trained the dog, patiently, over days, to be silent on a hand signal, a flat palm pressed against the side of his muzzle. Lantern pressed against her thigh and did not make a sound. The recorder captured what followed. 2 male voices, speaking at normal conversational volume, standing just outside the mine gate. One voice was lower and irritated. The other was higher and running nervous. The lower voice said, "Someone cut the wire. Someone has been inside. The higher voice said, "I told you we should have cleaned it out 2 years ago, Dale. I told you when the woman died. She was sick. She didn't tell anyone. We checked. Well, someone is in there now. The wire's been cut and retied. You don't retie a wire you cut by accident." The lower voice again, controlled but tight. "It's the girl, the foster kid. She bought lot 7714 at the auction last week." A pause. Then the higher voice, "She what? You told me nobody would bid on it." "Nobody was supposed to. $5. She paid $5. Silence. 8 seconds of it on the recording. Then the higher voice strained now. "Dale, if she finds Earl's cabinet, she's 18 years old and she's homeless. Who is she going to tell?" "Everyone, Dale. She's going to tell everyone. We need to get in there and clear it out before. We are not going in there tonight. We don't know if she's inside right now. We come back in daylight. Official. I'll put a condemnation notice on the property. Unsafe structure. County authority to seal. That gives us 72 hours to clear it." "And the girl?" "The girl has nothing. No family, no lawyer, no one who'll believe her over a county administrator. She'll fight the condemnation and lose. By the time she gets a hearing, the mine will be empty." Footsteps. The gate rattled once. Silence. 2 car doors. Engine. Gone. The recorder captured all of it. 4 minutes and 31 seconds of audio. Time-stamped 1:08 a.m. to 1:12 and 31 seconds. November the 15th. Wren waited an hour before she retrieved the recorder. Her hands were steady. Lantern licked her wrist once. She played the recording back on the tiny speaker, volume barely audible, sitting in the dark with the lockbox evidence on one side of her and the recorder on the other. She now had a face from the trail camera, a name spoken aloud by the second man, a county plate number, a stated plan to condemn her property, and a timeline, 72 hours. Lorraine's first letter had said it plain. "Do not trust Dale Fentress." Lorraine had known. Earl had known. And now Wren knew. Wren is 18 years old, alone in a mine, and she has just recorded 2 men planning to bury the truth. Again, she has 72 hours. If this is the kind of story that makes you want to see what happens when someone who has nothing refuses to lose, stay here. A subscribe takes 1 second, and it tells us to keep making these. You have heard the recording. You know what is in the lockbox. Would you ride that bicycle into town, or would you ride it the other direction, as far from Hardin County as you could get? Day 13, November the 17th. 8:14 in the morning. A white Hardin County vehicle, not the Tahoe this time, a marked code enforcement truck, pulled up the fire road. The road camera captured it. A uniformed code enforcement officer taped a yellow condemnation notice to the mine entrance timber. Notice of unsafe structure, county authority to seal, effective 72 hours. Signed by Hardin County Code Enforcement, by authority of Dale R. Fentress, Administrator. Wren photographed the notice with her phone. She read the 72-hour deadline. She looked at Lantern, who was sitting beside the entrance, watching the code enforcement truck disappear down the fire road, with the calm of an animal that had seen people come and go from this place for a long time, and had never been impressed by any of them. She had already, the night before, spent 4 hours photographing every document from the filing cabinet and the lockbox. 147 photographs, stored on her phone, and backed up to the phone's removable micro SD card, which she removed and taped inside the sole of her left boot, against the arch. The originals she left in place. She sealed the alcove wall with Earl's tools, matching the mortar as closely as she could, pressing the stone pieces back into their slots, and smoothing the joints with a wet finger. She rewired the gate. She made the mine look undisturbed. Then she packed her duffel bag, clipped a length of paracord to Lantern's collar, and began the 7-mile bicycle ride downhill toward Denton, the nearest town with a public library and an internet connection. She had 72 hours. The photographs were in her boot. The recorder was in her jacket. The dog was running beside the bicycle. And the man who had stolen from children for a decade had just given her, in writing, his official name. Wren locked her bicycle to a handicap sign outside the Denton Public Library, at 1:15 in the afternoon. Lantern waited outside, tied loosely with the paracord, to a bench, watching the parking lot. She went inside and sat down at a public computer terminal in the back corner, her boot pressing flat against the library's carpet, with the micro SD card sealed against her sole. Over the next 3 hours, she did what Lorraine and Earl had not lived long enough to do. She built the full picture. The file folders from the mine contained hand-tabulated records, maintained first by Earl and then by Lorraine, cross-referencing foster care case numbers with federal maintenance payments. Each child placed in Hardin County foster care generated a monthly federal payment ranging from $672 to $993, depending on the child's classification. The county's official records showed these payments going to approved foster families and county-administered group care. But the mine documents showed a second set of amounts, smaller, usually 30 to 40% of the total, being diverted to a line item labeled Supplemental Placement Services, which was billed to the county by a company called Ridgepoint Land Holdings, LLC. Using the library's computer and the Tennessee Secretary of State's business entity search, Wren found that Ridgepoint Land Holdings was registered in 2005 with a registered agent named Mac D. Rudolph. Address: 114 Orchard Lane, Denton, Tennessee. The company's stated purpose was property management and development services. It had no employees. It had no website. Its only documented income, as far as Wren could trace from the photocopied checks in the mine, came from Hardin County government accounts, signed by Dale R. Fentress. The connection was structural. Fentress, as County Child Services Administrator, had signatory authority over foster care disbursements. He was also, through his second county role, a member of the Property Assessment Committee that recommended tax lien parcels for auction or disposal. Mac Rudolph was a property developer who had purchased 6 county auction parcels between 2007 and 2014, all at minimum bid, all recommended for auction by Fentress's committee. The mine documents showed that Rudolph's discounted land purchases were the payment, the compensation for acting as the shell through which foster care funds were siphoned. Rudolph got cheap land. Fentress got cash through Ridgepoint. The children got nothing. Wren counted 94 unique case numbers in the folders spanning 2006 to 2014. 94 children. If the average diversion was $350 per month per child, and the average placement lasted 18 months, the total was approximately $592,200. She wrote the number on the back of a library receipt and stared at it. Almost $600,000, stolen from children who had no one to ask where the money went. The mine itself was part of the cover-up. Earl Kessler had stumbled onto a Ridgepoint check at a county meeting in 2011. A check made out to a company that did not exist for a service that was never performed, left in a folder he was never supposed to see. He spent the next 2 years gathering evidence and hiding it in the mine he owned, the one place he controlled that no one else cared about. When Earl died in November of 2013, the evidence stayed hidden. A 2014 state audit of county foster care expenditures triggered a panic. Fentress and Rudolph needed to ensure the mine was inaccessible. Fentress used his property committee role to push the mine parcel onto the tax lien auction list, betting that no one would buy a worthless prospect hole. And for 3 years, no one did. Lorraine found the evidence after Earl's death, but was too ill to act. Her death removed the last person who knew. Until Wren spent $5, she left the library at 4:30 in the afternoon. She had the full picture. She had 147 photographs on a micro SD card. She had a voice recording. She had trail camera footage. What she did not have was anyone to give it to. The Hardin County Sheriff's Department. Wren thought about it for less than a minute. The sheriff, Ray Britton, was an elected official who had run twice with the endorsement of the County Administrators Association. Fentress was the senior county administrator. In a county of 26,000 people, those connections were not theoretical. They were the same people at the same church dinners, the same fundraisers, the same handshakes at the county fair. Lorraine had written, "Do not trust anyone in this county. Wren extended that to anyone whose paycheck came from Hardin County, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. State level. Independent of county politics, Wren found the TBI's public tip line on the library computer and wrote down the phone number. But the TBI was in Nashville, 200 miles away, and phone tips were screened by intake analysts, who, she knew from her experience with systems and bureaucracies, rarely acted on a call from an 18-year-old with no permanent address, and a story about a mine. She needed to walk the evidence in, physically, to a human being at a state office who could look at the photographs and hear the recording. Nashville was 200 miles. She had a bicycle and a dog. At 5:45, as Wren was unlocking her bicycle outside the library, a white Chevrolet Tahoe with county plates drove slowly past the library parking lot. It did not stop. It did not need to. Denton had fewer than 4,000 people. She had been inside the library for 3 hours. Someone had noticed. At 7 that evening, her phone rang, a number she did not recognize. She answered. A male voice, not the same voice from the mine recording, but with the same regional cadence, said, "Is this the young lady who bought the Kessler property?" Wren said nothing. "I'm calling from the county assessor's office. We need to discuss the condemnation notice. There are some options we'd like to walk you through. Can you come into the office tomorrow morning?" Wren said. "I'll think about it," and hung up. She did not go back to the mine that night. She found a 24-hour laundromat on the edge of Denton, sat in a plastic chair with lantern at her feet, and thought. The condemnation notice gave them 72 hours to seal the mine. The phone call suggested they wanted to resolve it faster, and options almost certainly meant one thing: sign over the property and walk away, and the condemnation would disappear. She had 48 hours left on the notice. She was 200 miles from Nashville. She had no car, no money for a bus, and a dog she was not willing to leave behind. The micro SD card was in her boot. The recorder was in her jacket. The originals were in the mine behind a wall she had resealed. And in 48 hours, Fentress would have county authority to go inside and remove everything. Wren sat in the laundromat and watched the dryers spin. Lantern watched her. She needed a car. She needed a driver. She needed someone who had no connection to Hardin County and no reason to lie. At 9 that evening, Wren called the only phone number she had that was not connected to the county. A woman named Patricia Garza, who ran a Knoxville-based non-profit called Bridge Forward that provided legal aid to aged-out foster youth. Wren had been given Patricia's card 18 months earlier by a social worker at a resource fair she attended once and almost did not go to. She had never called the number. She had carried the card in the waterproof pouch with Lorraine's letters. One more thing to hold on to that she did not know if she would need. Patricia answered on the 4th ring. Wren talked for 22 minutes. She described the mine, the documents, the recordings, the condemnation notice, and the timeline. Patricia listened without interrupting, not once, for the entire 22 minutes. When Wren finished, Patricia said 2 things. "I am driving to Denton tonight, and I am bringing a lawyer." Patricia Garza arrived at the Denton laundromat at 1:40 in the morning on November the 18th. She was 51 years old, had been a foster child herself, and drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a Bridge Forward bumper sticker on the back. With her was a pro bono attorney named David Uhl, who worked out of the same Knoxville office and who specialized in government accountability cases. He was tall, wore wire-rimmed glasses, and carried a messenger bag that looked like it had been through a war and had won. Lantern sniffed them both, took his time about it, and then lay down. That was good enough for Wren. She showed them the photographs on the micro SD card, played the audio recording on the Olympus unit, and let them scroll through the trail camera images on her phone. David Uhl sat in the laundromat's plastic chair, looked at the photocopied checks, and said quietly, "This is enough for the TBI to open an investigation. More than enough." But Wren wanted more. She wanted the mine's originals preserved. Not just the photographs, but the physical evidence. If Fentress cleared the mine during the condemnation window, the originals would disappear, and the case would rest on photographs that a defense attorney could challenge as fabricated or altered. She needed to catch Fentress entering the mine to remove evidence, on camera, with a timestamp after a condemnation notice he himself had signed. She had 26 hours left on the notice. The plan divided into 3 parts. David Uhl would drive to Nashville at dawn with copies of the evidence and file an emergency complaint with the TBI. Patricia would stay in Denton with Wren. Wren would return to the mine, not inside, but within range of the trail cameras, and ensure the cameras were running with fresh batteries. If Fentress came to clear the mine before the TBI could act, the cameras would document it. A county administrator, entering a property he had condemned, removing evidence of his own fraud, while the property's legal owner had been ordered to stay out. That footage, combined with the documents, the audio and the trail camera history, would be incontrovertible. Wren replaced the batteries in all 3 trail cameras using spares Patricia had bought at a Knoxville Walmart on the drive down. She added a 4th camera, Patricia's own dash cam, detached from the windshield and zip-tied to a tree with a clear sightline of the mine entrance, running on its car battery adapter connected to a portable jumpstart pack. 4 cameras now. Overlapping angles. Combined storage, enough for 72 hours of motion-activated recording. Then Wren did something that showed the difference between an impulsive teenager and a person Lorraine Kessler had raised. She wrote a letter, by hand, on paper Patricia provided, addressed to Dale R. Fentress, delivered to the county administration office via certified mail at the Denton post office at 8:30 in the morning on November the 18th. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Fentress, I am the legal owner of Lot 7714, Kessler Ridge Mine. I am writing to inform you that I am formally contesting the condemnation notice posted on November 17. I have retained legal counsel. Please direct all further communication regarding this property to David Uhl, Attorney at Law, Bridge Forward Legal Aid. Knoxville, sincerely, Wren Galloway." The letter was not the trap. The letter was the trigger. It told Fentress that Wren had a lawyer. It told him the 72-hour window was not going to close quietly. It told him that if he wanted to clear the mine, he had to do it now, before the TBI could respond to David Uhl's complaint, and before a judge could issue a stay on the condemnation. It forced his hand. At 3:15 that afternoon, David Uhl arrived at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Nashville field office and handed a thumb drive to an intake agent named Carolyn Meade. At 3:40, Carolyn Meade called her supervisor. At 4, her supervisor called the Field Investigation Unit. At 4:22, a TBI special agent named Marcus Shaw opened the audio file from the mine and listened to 2 men plan the destruction of evidence. He picked up his phone, and at 11:47 that same night, 20 hours before the condemnation notice would expire, the white Chevrolet Tahoe came up the fire road one last time. 4 cameras were running. The fire road was dark. The fog was low on the ridge, pooling in the same places it had pooled the morning Wren first arrived, and the cold had deepened in the 2 weeks since, turning the air sharp enough to taste. At 11:47 p.m., the white Tahoe turned off its headlights on the county road and swung onto the fire road grade. The road camera triggered at 11:47 and 3 seconds. Plates, HCD 4401. The Tahoe stopped 40 feet from the mine entrance. 2 men got out. The entrance cameras captured both faces, lit by a single headlamp one of them was wearing. Dale Fentress, 60 years old, heavy-set, ball cap, moving with the stiff purpose of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his head. Mac Rudolph, shorter, thinner, carrying a large duffel bag and a bolt cutter. They did not speak. They walked to the mine gate. Fentress cut the rewired gate with the bolt cutters. Rudolph held the gate open. They stepped inside. The 4th camera, Patricia's dash cam mounted inside the entrance at knee height, captured their boots crossing the threshold at 11:49 and 14 seconds. Fentress's headlamp swept the main tunnel. They moved quickly. They knew where the filing cabinet was. Wren was not inside the mine. She was sitting in Patricia Garza's Honda Civic, parked behind a stand of pine trees a quarter-mile south of the fire road. Watching the road camera's live view feed on a tablet Patricia had connected via a short-range wireless link. Lantern was in the back seat, silent. Patricia was beside her, on the phone with TBI Special Agent Marcus Shaw. Shaw was already in transit, having left Knoxville at 9 that evening after the TBI opened an emergency file. He was 23 minutes out. The cameras ran. 14 minutes after entering the mine, Fentress and Rudolph emerged carrying the duffel bag, now heavy, bulging, the filing cabinet's contents visible through the bag's unzipped top. Rudolph was carrying the green lockbox under his other arm. They loaded everything into the Tahoe's back seat. Fentress pulled the mine gate shut and wrapped it with new wire. At 12:06 a.m., on November the 19th, they got back in the Tahoe and started the engine. They did not make it off the fire road. 2 vehicles blocked the exit. A Hardin County Sheriff's cruiser, which TBI agent Shaw had requested as local support, calling the state police dispatcher directly rather than the county sheriff's office, and Shaw's own unmarked sedan. Shaw stepped out with his badge visible and a second TBI agent beside him. The sheriff's deputy, a 26-year-old named Leah Colvin, who had never met Dale Fentress and had no reason to do him any favors, stood by her cruiser with her hand resting on her belt. Fentress stopped the Tahoe. He sat in the driver's seat for 19 seconds. The road camera captured every one of them. 19 seconds of a man sitting in a vehicle full of evidence that he had just removed from a mine he had condemned, on property he did not own. At midnight, with bolt cutters in the passenger seat. 19 seconds before the rest of his life began. He opened the door. Shaw's first words, audible on the dashcam's audio pickup. "Mr. Fentress, I'm Special Agent Marcus Shaw with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. I need you to step out of the vehicle. Do not touch the bag." The duffel bag was in the back seat. The lockbox was on the floor. Every document Lorraine and Earl Kessler had gathered over 7 years was still inside. Fentress had carried it out of the mine and into the arms of the state. Wren watched from the Honda Civic as TBI agents inventoried the contents of the Tahoe. She did not approach. Patricia put a hand on her shoulder and said nothing. Lantern pressed his muzzle against the gap between the front seats and breathed warm air against the back of Wren's neck. At 12:34 in the morning, Agent Shaw walked over to the Honda and tapped on the window. Wren rolled it down. Shaw looked at her for a moment. 18 years old, sitting in someone else's car, a stray dog in the back seat. A micro SD card taped inside her boot, he said. "Miss Galloway, I have some questions for you. But first, are you somewhere safe tonight?" Wren looked at Patricia. She looked at Lantern. She said, "I'm with my people." Shaw nodded. The questions could wait until morning. Later, hours later, sitting in a booth at a 24-hour diner in Denton, with Lantern asleep under the table and Patricia across from her making phone calls to the Bridge Forward office. Wren took the waterproof pouch from inside her jacket and unfolded Lorraine's original letter. The first one. The kitchen table letter. The one that had started everything. She read the last paragraph for the 100th time. But this time, for the first time, she read it as someone who had done what it asked. "I know what I am asking is too much. You are a child, and I am sending you into the dark because the people who were supposed to keep the light on chose to steal from children instead. I have no right to ask it. I am asking because I know you. I have watched you read a room in 10 seconds. I have watched you fix things that were meant to stay broken. I have watched you take care of creatures that everyone else walked past. You are the bravest person I have ever had the privilege of failing to deserve. I did not save you, Wren. You saved me. Every single day you saved me. Whatever happens in that mine, whatever you find, whatever you decide to do with it, please know that I loved you with every breath I had, and the only thing I regret is that I ran out of them." Wren folds the letter along the same creases it has always had. She puts it back in the pouch. She puts the pouch back inside her jacket, over her heart, where it has been since the morning Lorraine died. She does not cry, but her hands, for the first time in 14 days, are shaking. Patricia reaches across the table and holds them steady. Dale Fentress was arrested on the fire road at 12:08 a.m. on November the 19th. He was charged with theft of government property, evidence tampering, and trespass on private land. Wren's land. Bought and paid for, $5. Lot 7714. Mac Rudolph was charged alongside him. The TBI's subsequent investigation took 4 months and involved a forensic accountant, 8 boxes of county records, subpoenaed from 3 separate offices, and testimony from 14 former foster families. The investigation confirmed the scope of the conspiracy. $614,000 in federal foster care maintenance payments, diverted between 2006 and 2014 through Ridgepoint Land Holdings, LLC. 94 children affected. None of them had ever been told. Fentress pleaded guilty to 12 counts under a cooperation agreement. He was sentenced to 9 years. Rudolph pleaded guilty to 4 counts. He was sentenced to 6 years and lost every county contract and every property he had purchased at discount through Fentress's recommendations. 7 parcels in total, returned to county inventory. Hardin County's Child Services Department was placed under state receivership for 18 months. A new administrator was appointed from outside the county. The mine documents, Earl and Lorraine Kessler's handwritten evidence, 7 years of a quiet man's courage, followed by a dying woman's final act, were admitted into the state record as Exhibits 1 through 47. In January, 2 months after Fentress's arrest, David Uhl filed a wrongful enrichment claim on Wren's behalf against Hardin County. The claim was not for damages. It was for the federal foster care funds that had been diverted from Wren's own case, $12,516, the exact amount she had calculated sitting on the mine floor on November the 8th. The county, now under state receivership, settled within 60 days. $12,516, deposited into a checking account Wren opened at a Denton credit union with Patricia Garza as a reference. It was the first money Wren had ever had that was legally, unmistakably hers. She did not leave Hardin County. The settlement was enough for a few months of stability, not wealth but ground beneath her feet. She used $1,400 to make the mine entrance structurally safe, replacing the rotted 4th timber, the one that had given back a hollow note on her first day, and installing a proper steel gate with a lock she owned the only key to. She used $600 to run a basic electrical line from a generator to the first chamber. She used $200 to register a Tennessee business entity, Kessler Ridge Workshop, LLC. She began teaching, not formally at first. 3 aged-out foster youth from the Bridge Forward Network came to Denton in March, referred by Patricia. Wren taught them what the salvage crews had taught her: how to read a structure, how to strip and sort materials, how to use hand tools safely, how to see what was broken and understand what it would take to fix it. They lived in donated trailers on the 4 acres. They worked in the mine's first chamber, which Wren had cleared and lit and turned into a workshop that smelled like sawdust and mineral cold air. And, on certain mornings, when someone was making coffee on a camp stove near the entrance, something faintly like Lorraine's kitchen. By June there were 7. By the following November, 1 year after Wren had cut the wire on the cattle gate, there were 11. The same number of children Lorraine Kessler had fostered over 22 years. Wren did not comment on the coincidence. She did not need to. One of the 11 was a 22-year-old man named Jonah Pace, who had aged out of Hardin County foster care in 2016 and had been living in a halfway house in Chattanooga. His case number appeared in the mine files, row 71, 2010 folder. He had lost $8,568 in diverted benefits. He was the first person besides Wren to testify in the state investigation, and his testimony corroborated the paper trail independently, confirming dates and placement details that matched Earl's ledger entries exactly. He drove to Denton after the trial, walked into the workshop, and did not say much. He picked up a wrench, looked at it, turned it over in his hands, and said, "Show me what to do." He never left. Denton did not embrace Wren all at once. A few people resented the attention, the state investigators, the newspaper reporters, the shame of a county scandal laid open for the world to see. But the laundromat where Wren had spent the night before Patricia arrived became an informal drop-off point for donations. Sleeping bags, hand tools, canned food, a box of work gloves left on the counter with no name attached. The library where she had built the case gave her a permanent reserved computer terminal, third from the left in the back row, with a small printed card taped to the monitor that read, "Reserved." The credit union waived her account fees. These were small things. They were the kind of things a town does when it cannot say it is sorry, but needs to say something. On the 1-year anniversary, November the 3rd, Wren walked up the fire road to the mine entrance alone. Lantern walked beside her, heavier now, coat glossy and full, no longer astray by any measure that mattered. The steel gate she had installed was unlocked, and from inside the first chamber came the sound of a hand drill and someone laughing. She reached into her jacket pocket and took out a piece of paper, the original tax auction receipt, creased and soft, printed on county thermal paper that was already beginning to fade at the edges. Lot 7714, Kessler Ridge Mine entrance and 4.1 acres. Sold. $5. She had carried it for a year. Through the mine and the dark, through the laundromat and the library, through the diner at 2 in the morning, and the fire road at midnight. It had been in her pocket when she watched 2 men carry the truth out of a mountain and into the arms of the state. She did not frame it. She did not file it. She folded it once more, a new crease, perpendicular to the old ones, and slid it into the waterproof pouch alongside Lorraine's letters, where it had always belonged. $5 and 7 pages of blue ink, the most valuable things anyone had ever left her. Lantern sat beside the gate and watched the ridge. The air tasted like cold pennies, the same as it had a year ago. Inside the mine, someone laughed again, the sound bouncing off the limestone walls and out into the November light. Wren touched the pouch through her jacket, once, the way she always did, to make sure it was still there, and walked inside.